My name is Ronan Murphy, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Forcepoint, and delighted to have two brilliant guests with me today for this webinar on um, data and security and AI in education. So we've Raluca Saceanu, who's the Chief Executive of SmartTech 247, one of the leading cybersecurity companies based in Europe, and Brian Johnson, who's the Director of Cybersecurity with Liberty University. So guys, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you both join me today, two of the very best subject matter experts in everything data and cyber. So just to start off, I guess, in Forcepoint, we deal with a lot of different industry verticals across defense, manufacturing, retail, and indeed education. And education is an interesting one because as educational organizations, number one, you touch vast quantities of data, and that data goes through an interesting life cycle of sometimes it's confidential, sometimes that confidential data becomes public, and then sometimes that public data can go become confidential again. You obviously have vast amounts of students who are continually accessing systems and creating, again, vast quantities of data. So that brings its own unique challenges for anyone that's working in the educational vertical. And it's something that I guess I'm super interested to pick your brain on and drill down into in more detail today. So, Raluca, if I could maybe start off with you in SmartTech 247, the Security Operations Center, obviously you're seeing thousands of events every day, lots of different indicators of compromise, and I guess different scenarios where educational institutions are being targeted. So could you walk us through what a data incident in a university might look like, and how would you guys address these types of challenges from a proactive security perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, thank you, Brian, for joining us today, and Ronan as well. It's a pleasure to be here. And at SmartTech 247, we have the pleasure of securing quite a few universities in Ireland and outside of Ireland as well. So we understand the type of data that they have and the type of data that they need to secure on a daily basis. Um, in every university environment that we see, the attack surface is huge. You've got research networks, you've got thousands of students, and therefore student-related data. You've got faculty endpoints, you've got your own staff, and that has in itself PII data and other sensitive data as well. Legacy systems, I'm sure you all have to deal with legacy systems and cloud infrastructure. So there's the attack surface is quite large. And because there's a constant exchange of sensitive data, like I said before, the student records, the financials, the intellectual property, even now AI training data sets, since we are on the topic of AI, you've got a lot to protect. So, for example, when our Security Operations Center looks at telemetry, and it's literally millions of events every single hour, you're looking at everything from failed loggings, vulnerabilities, data transfers. You can only imagine the access control anomalies. You're looking at absolutely everything. So when you're looking at, let's say, data specifically, and what a data incident could be, you have to remember that there's a lot of noise as well that comes in. So you need an engine to filter that noise. But specifically, what you also need is very good data classification, because only then you can understand what you're looking at. And as part of our MDR, we have a bit of a different approach when it comes to looking at systems and data, because we help our customers not just monitor their cloud infrastructure or their vulnerabilities or their gaps, but we also help them monitor their data. So help them tag and classify this data based on sensitivity. And in the case of universities, that could be, a particular tag for student IP, student PII, for IP, for research data, for operational data. So when something looks off, we have specific filters, specific tags to understand what exactly is off. And remember, sometimes a data incident can come in masked as a completely different incident, or it could be a compromised student or a compromised staff credential. It could be a phishing email. And from there, the attacker pivots, right? So they're stealing credentials, they're scanning shared drives, they're looking for ways to gain access to data, and they're looking for ways to gain legitimate access so that when they perhaps steal this data, it goes unnoticed. But because of our classification systems and because of our incredible filtering, we're able to see these anomalies really fast and then apply containment. That containment can be we isolate the endpoint, or we look at removing credentials from that particular insider, we block access, and essentially we can block the data from leaking.
Thank you, Raluca. Brian, yeah, I've been around the block a long time, and you're one of the best subject matter experts when it comes to data and it comes to obviously working in Liberty. You get to see it all, right? I'm interested in your perspective on the evolution of AI, because when I think about AI, I mean it's kind of an insidious technology, right? It comes at an organization in the format of GPTs, LLMs that might be pulled down from Hugging Face, co-pilots, applications that are AI powered. And the one thing that's, I guess, common across all of these applications is that they introduce huge new productivity gains for the organizations that operationalize them. But at the same time, they can present very significant risk in terms of the type of data they access and how they may be misused in the business. And I'm curious about, your perspective and your experience with AI and where you see it going and how you see it impacting on the educational verticals.
Sure. Thank you, Ronan, and thank you both for having me here. I've been looking forward to this. And it's certainly on everyone's mind is how do you incorporate AI into what your business does? And obviously, in a university, our product is our students, and so everything we do from an IT perspective is meant to deliver a better student experience, and in turn produce a better product. And AI is, from a productivity perspective, it's enabling our faculty and staff to do things faster and more efficiently, whether it's integrating that with their the learning management system to help with course content creation, or just dealing with managing courses in itself. And then there's a lot built in for students as well. But then for the faculty and staff, you have all the standard productivity suites, and that's where that's where the most exposure that we're having right now is in that type of area, like you said, the co-pilots. So I think what the benefit that it brings, it certainly introduces some administrative challenges, especially for security teams. And one example that comes to mind is, and I've heard of this happening, is where you provision a new AI enabled application in your environment, and if you give it the default permissions, there's a good chance that it will have write access or read access to your calendar, and then it can attend meetings with you. Or even if you're not there, it can attend the meetings and then it can take notes for you, can summarize those notes, and then after the meeting, it can send a email to everyone that was on the invite of everything that was said during the meeting. And that's a great way to be more productive. But if there's sensitive topics discussed during the meeting that were really meant only for in that meeting, and you're sending it to a wide array of people that were not there, that's just privacy concerns that you have to deal with. So I think, where is it going, especially in education? It is going to continue to enable more and more processes. And to get ahead of that, you really have to have governance in mind. So governance of that the AI enabled applications and put out some sort of policy across your organization that says this is what, we are embracing AI, because you don't want to be seen as you're not going to do AI, because then shadow IT is just going to take off and skyrocket. But you want to support it and enable the business with AI, and especially from an IT perspective. But getting the leadership on board with establishing policy and saying this is what's acceptable. Here are the enterprise supported apps, enterprise approved apps, and make them available. So it's easy for the faculty and staff and students to get their hands on it and to use it. And then maybe if there's a few out there that you do not want your staff and faculty to use because they have a history of not protecting data or they have privacy concerns, you would want to list them in your guidance or your policy. And one of the things, if a company is looking to do business with a university or an institution of higher education, there is a thing we use called a HECVAT. And a HECVAT is Higher Education Community Vendor Assessment Tool. And think of like a SOC 2 report or SOC 2 Type 2 report that is like an attestation in time of the security controls that a vendor has to protect the data that they're potentially going to sell to a customer. It's very similar. The HECVAT is just really focused on higher education. And there is a section in there that specifically addresses AI and how that software incorporates AI to talk about, the data and how it flows through the network. Is it hosted in the cloud? Is it hosted locally? Or, a number of different areas. So that can really empower security teams to get that visibility of what that software involves. And that connects really, it's very similar to what is laid out in NIST. So the National Institute for Security Standards and Technology lays out an AI risk framework, and in there they encourage you, or they provide a framework for governing, mapping, measuring, and managing trustworthy use of AI systems. And I think those kind of tools and those kind of frameworks are meant to enable security teams in higher education so they can sort of tackle this with eyes wide open and have a deliberate plan.
That's that's an outstanding answer, Brian. Raluca, over to you, right? In my experience, I've seen the Security Operations Center kind of evolve, right? Where to traditionally started off looking at log data and threat intelligence, and as you said, a lot of telemetry from a lot of different devices across the Security Operations Center. But in Forcepoint, we're seeing organizations go on a journey, right? They're going through a rapid pace of modernization. They're moving workloads from on-prem to the cloud, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle. And that inevitably leads to kind of data sprawl and data fragmentation. At the same time, they're looking to operationalize AI, and obviously having shadow data or data sprawl or data fragmentation, or to Brian's point, shadow IT, that presents very significant challenges to the quality of the data that can potentially be used in these very powerful systems. And then obviously you've got very much a changing regulatory landscape where much of the regulation, even at a vertical level, is focusing at the data layer and putting very stringent controls around how organizations handle and use data. And in Europe, interestingly, we've seen the introduction of the EU AI Act. So I'm curious, you spend a lot of time speaking with CISOs and boards and helping to customize the type of rhetoric and messaging that they should be considering. And I've seen that evolve, and I've seen you evolve over the years, where it's no longer just about your firewalls and your EDRs and your SIM. It's now also the combining that data layer and that security layer. And I guess, what type of advice do you give to an organization, to a board, to a leadership team, on how they should be addressing all of these technological changes which are gathering pace?
I think that's an interesting question, because I don't know any organization that doesn't have a data quality problem. If you can imagine, over the last 20, 25 years, we've gathered so much data in our organizations, and some of it is probably still there for a lot of us. And now that we're looking at making sense of this data and using it for AI, we're starting to see that perhaps we do have a data quality problem, and it's not an easy problem to tackle, because it has become the currency of what I'd like to call organizational resilience. Whether you're using it for AI models or whether you're using it to move data to the cloud, regardless of what organizations are intending to do with the data, you do need to understand what you have, what kind of data you have in place. When I talk to CISOs and boards, I'm seeing a lot of questions moving from, are we secure, which is a very basic question that nobody can answer, to what is our critical data, where is our critical data, and who owns the critical data that we have. Can we even trust the data that's training our models? Certain organizations are a little bit more advanced, and they're now using their vast quantities of data to train their AI models. Or even if they're buying AI models off the shelf, you still need to train those models so that you can get the intended purposes of those models. So they're asking themselves the questions of what kind of data we have, and then you're looking at the other side of the equation. What happens if our data gets exposed on the dark web? And I do think this is a critical question that a lot of organizations are asking these days, especially when you see what has happened with certain attacks lately. And inevitably, the data has landed on the dark web. So the question has moved from, again, are we secure, to what kind of data do we have? How do we secure this data? What is the best way? What is the most efficient way for us to start securing this data? How resilient are we? And that's the real kind of board concern that we're seeing right now. So when we speak to the boards and to the CISOs, we tell them that it's not about firewalls anymore. It's not even about phishing or patching anymore. You need to understand your data value. You need to understand the risks in a business context, and you need to embark on a journey of really understanding your data maturity and your posture, right, when it comes to data. And that means that you need the right tools, first of all, and you need the right mindset as well, because if you're not asking the right questions, you don't know where you're looking. And it's so easy to turn around and say, we're fine. Our data is okay, and let's just drive ahead and implement these AI models and implement all these initiatives without accurately understanding how exposed you are. So my advice is always try and connect the dots between technical controls and the business impact. Think about your data from a maturity journey perspective. What are your enablers? What do you want to do with that data? How do you want to secure it effectively? And then back to what Brian was saying as well, have the right governance in place. You will need a policy. You will need to adopt a framework. There are a lot of very good frameworks that you can use, and you need to go back to the board responsibility and accountability as well, because they do hold accountability now, and work hand in hand with them to implement a program that is efficient, that is resilient, and that works for your organization.
Thank you, Raluca. And Brian, Raluca covered a lot there, right? And interestingly, when I think about academia, right, it's an interesting one because when I think about it, a bit almost like the health medical sector, right, or the healthcare. And when you go to a hospital, I mean, their preeminent objective is to save lives and to deliver good health, right? And if the cyber function or the IT function gets in the way of the consultants or the doctors or the surgeons, there's hell to pay, right? And at the end of the day, they'll always say, "Look, our objective is human life." and don't let technology get in our way, right, or slow us down, right? Um, to a degree, and you might disagree with me here, I sometimes feel that academia can be the same, right? You've got a lot of really smart professors and teachers across a university who sometimes are smarter than the rest of us, but also very opinionated and very set in their ways in terms of how they want to be able to access data and use data and share data and so forth. So I'm curious, a guy like you comes in, right? You're a subject matter expert in all things data and all things security and building these programs from the ground up. What does that look like, doing that effectively in a university or an educational vertical as a whole? And what type of challenges would you typically run into? You know, a new kind of CIO coming into this role.
Yeah, you
By the
are.
way, feel free to disagree with me if you want, Brian.
No, you're spot on. And at the end of the day, if security is in the way of the business, regardless of what that business is, it's just not going to be sustainable. And you really want to enable the business, and in security, it should be no different. So one of the things that, because you have so many different colleges in a university and these different groups of professors, and they're doing all these great things. They're doing it in a disparate fashion because they have their own data challenges. If there is an engineering school that's doing research or something like that, they're going to have very unique. If you have a medical school, that's going to be certainly a different challenge as well. But I think it's really about visibility and understanding like how we're going to sticking with the AI theme, knowing how prevalent AI enabled applications or AI powered software is in your environment is a good first step. After you've got the governance in place and you've got awareness, then getting visibility and using different capabilities like a cloud app security broker or an endpoint detection and response capability. With those two kinds of tools or similar types of tools, you can scan your environment and you can find out even with managed systems and with unmanaged systems what type of applications are present in your environment. And I'm confident with this saying that you will see, if you run these scans at any given time, at least 150 different AI powered applications that are in use in your environment. Now, if you have good that communication, that guidance, and that policy that I talked about in the beginning, you'll probably see at the very top of the list is your IT approved, IT supported applications. Um, but you'll also probably see some of those applications like ones that don't have great privacy track records or security track records at protecting data. So they'll be on that list too. That'll give you awareness of what's in your environment, and that can give you some strategy direction to tackle what to do next. And I think Raluca really talked very, very well on data and the challenges with data. So, from my perspective, in a security role, you really want to know where your sensitive data is, and I'll hit on what those areas of sensitive data are. But deploying tools for data classification and data storage that are consistent with your policy. I did mention AI policy, but in addition to that, you have things like an acceptable use policy that should be in place to really lay out to your users what they can, what they can't do, what's supported, what's not supported. But then you also want to have a policy like a data classification policy or a data storage policy. And by deploying tools for discovery and classification, you can really get an understanding of where you have sensitive data and what controls you have in place. And then you can kind of plan out, okay, we have this type of data here, this type of data here. We have segmentation here, and we have proper access controls. So the right people are accessing the right segment of data. And oftentimes in an environment that's, like I said, it's somewhat disparate, you're going to have unstructured data, and you're going to have your OneDrive, your Dropbox, your network attached storage, SharePoint, and those that's sort of, they're all over the place. So getting a good tools to help you understand where they are, will really let you tackle where you have risk that needs to be addressed. And what kind of data are we talking about? Well, like I said, the biggest product a university has is their students. So really it starts with student records and protecting student records. That's your, the grades, the course load and the courses that they're taking, the degree programs they're in. And then, any specific like record specific PII, we're going to have standard data that the students can have social security numbers, driver's license, etc. And so that's protected or covered by FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that governs student data. And it's usually, if you lose it, you need to report to the Department of Education that you have a data loss event. But that, so FERPA is probably one of the biggest sensitive data types that we have in a university environment. And oftentimes those are in a structured database like, an enterprise resource planning solution or ERP. That's where it starts. But oftentimes what happens is, a professor or faculty or staff, they oftentimes they'll export those and then they'll go into spreadsheets to look at certain data fields, or they're looking at, put them in a Word document or whatever. Those are now they become unstructured and they go into all those places I talked about earlier. So, having a good idea and having some data discovery, data classification tools to find those are important. But some other ones that, might not come to mind immediately when you think of an institution of higher education, but financial aid. The financial aid is the protection of financial aid data is governed by Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA, and that really that's also a law, a federal law, and must be protected and regulated accordingly. But and to talk about the data discovery and data classification, it's probably a specific department that handles that type of data. FERPA, student records, is probably handled by quite a few, but financial aid is probably student financial services or something like that. So understanding where student financial services keeps their data and how they have access control is important. So those are some unique challenges I see, and kind of if you're thinking about that and you're planning accordingly, I think that's kind of the best you can hope for right now.
Thanks, Brian. Raluca, some parting advice. If you are a large education institution and you are, trying to manage your modernization journey, manage your workloads moving from on-prem to cloud and so forth, you're trying to consider how do you operationalize your AI initiatives while all the time dealing with all the regulation that Brian just spoke about. And ensure that you're doing it in a safe and secure manner. What's your advice from the ground up here?
I think the basics are still important and that we shouldn't lose sight of those. And I'm going to get a little bit technical and then I'm going to move over to the other side of the equation. What I want people to remember is that 90% of the cyber attacks where you end up in data leakage are not sophisticated, right? By nature, attacks are just not sophisticated. They get in using stolen credentials, they spread laterally, and mostly they're successful because they might exploit an account that has access. They move on from there. They know the gaps, and they spend time in your systems, and then they might, move laterally and steal your data. So it's not that sophisticated. You have to understand where your gaps are. You have to monitor your systems. And I've seen it happen in many, many cases that people have a system in place for monitoring, but it doesn't cover absolutely everything. So you need to understand, do you have you have exposed web servers, do you have exposed service accounts, exposed passwords, because that's how they get in, right? So now if we move to less technical from a governance perspective, it's really important that you know where your data is. And the best way to know how vulnerable you are is to do a simple exercise, maybe a red teaming exercise, get someone to come in and try and access that data and see if they can exfiltrate the data. you have to classify your data. It goes back to your basics. And after you classify it, try and connect it to your wider security program so that if you do have an event, you can stop it. That the classification of that event is accurate as well, and that you have good data hygiene too. From a wider governance perspective as well, you mentioned this, Brian, really well. It's so important to have a program in place. Have a, if you're an institution, an educational institution, having an AI governance board could be quite useful. And this can include educators, your legal department, your data protection officers, your CTO, your CISO. Build your AI inventories so that you can track what kind of AI technologies you have in place, what tools you use. You can track those wild models that you don't know about and that could leak your data. And really importantly, have a data security program in place that spans from those technical controls I mentioned earlier to the governance controls as well.
Thank you, Raluca. Brian, parting thoughts, staring into your crystal ball, what does the educational sector face in terms of threats, opportunities, challenges when it comes to all things data, AI, and cyber over the coming 5 years?
Looking into my crystal ball here, I do think the challenges are somewhat the same as they've always been, but technology obviously takes it to a whole nother level. And I think as fast as AI is moving and as fast as the technology is getting integrated and embraced by organizations, not just organizations, also attackers. I think it just accelerates the timeline for how quickly you have to be prepared to respond and have a good program in place. So, I think once you have the things that I've laid out and that Raluca's talked about, and you're doing the basics, that's when you really need to make a data security posture management program. You need to put that in place, and that needs where the security teams are working with data owners. So it's not just on security, it's the data owners themselves, it's the system owners, and working together to understand the risks. And they're often, like Raluca said, they're not sophisticated to getting access. And I think the attacks will be more sophisticated because they're shouldn't say that they're not going to be more sophisticated, but they're going to leverage technology to bypass sophisticated systems. And
Yes.
and once how do you increase your ability to prevent that? And I think partnering with organizations that provide like a data that help provide a data security posture management or DSPM solutions can be a big step in that direction. And since we're talking about AI, I would encourage the term agentic AI. It sounds fancy, but really what it is, it's just several different AI powered agents doing different tasks. And if you incorporate agentic AI security into your DSPM, it can turn from just monitoring and just awareness to taking mitigation steps and maybe having automated runbooks where you can, okay, if a file is, so this is an important spreadsheet, and in there is it's maintained by this department, it has social security numbers, it has names and other sensitive information, and it's a necessary file. It's being used appropriately, but it's inadvertently stored in a way that's unsecure, or it has a publicly accessible link to anyone that gets the link, and that gets shared publicly. Knowing that is out there is pertinent for security team to enable the data owners and the system owners to make changes to protect that and to put in automated steps that can break that link and protect it, and then just an iterative process. I would say, the challenge, you're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to get it right, 100% right. but it has to be an iterative process, and you constantly have to be reviewing your DSPM and looking at did someone in the university purchase some new software that has is new data types, or it's being stored in a different place that you weren't originally understanding. So going back to like the NIST AI framework for mapping where you have data and constantly updating, and that's making sure that's an iterative process. It is. I've been in this role for a little over 6 years, and right at the beginning of this role, I started a data security journey, and where if I could look back now and say this is what I would have done in the beginning, have a strategy, be
Yeah.
specific, get executive buy-in to understand the problem. Those boards that Raluca talked about, have a committee that understands the problem and that can speak to leadership, and in turn can pass that on to all the constituents of the university in this case. So challenging, but making an iterative process. You're not going to get it right, and all the time, but can continually to improve on that is the best I think we can do.
What's your best advice to get the board to release budget?
uh, Make sure they understand the problems that you're trying to tackle, that the problems that the university is facing. And if you have one big problem, and I would say most organizations, phishing, as silly as it sounds, this should be something that we should have fully unlocked, and it shouldn't be a problem. It's constantly getting more challenging to defend against phishing emails. If that's a big problem, and it is a big problem for many organizations, you can pick up any threat report off the shelf from pick your vendor, pick your organization, and it'll say it's still social engineering is one of the biggest threats we face. So making sure that the board understands how complex the threat is, make it very simple for them to understand, and by fixing the problem or putting controls in place to fix the problem will help reduce money that's taken away, or in our case, our product is the student, but making sure that we don't have things that affect the ability to deliver that education, and put that at risk. So I think if you can do that, and certainly easier said than done, but that's a way to help the board see, hey, here's your
And
problem,
and
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 here's how we
it
can fix it.
an interesting, I guess, challenge that I see quite frequently is that, you know, an industry gets targeted by like ransomware attacks, right? So it could be healthcare, it could be manufacturing verticals, and suddenly the board will turn around and say, well, that university got hit with a ransomware attack. What's stopping us getting a hit? They have a bigger budget and they've got more people than us. And typically, it's interesting because we're talking about AI and data and having data ready for AI, but data is like water. It finds its way everywhere, right? It just multiplies and duplicates and is retained, and it's growing faster than it's ever grown before. And I think when you think about phishing, obviously one of the inevitable consequences of effective phishing is ransomware. And when ransomware happens, typically, the ransomware actors now realize that the organizations they're targeting tend to have good business continuity and data backup capabilities. And therefore, they focus their efforts on data exfiltration, and they use that exfiltration of data as their weapon for extortion. And the obvious challenge that I see is that because of the natural motion of data sprawl and fragmented data and shadow data, suddenly, inevitably, you find that a whole pile of sensitive, regulated information finds its way into these collaboration tools like SharePoint and OneDrive and Dropbox and SMB shares. And then when the data gets stolen, the obvious question is asked, well, did they get the student data? Did they get the patient data? Did they get the IP? And obviously the answer to that is, when you don't have visibility of the data, is we don't know. And that's where it gets problematic. And that's a conversation I tend to be having frequently with many large global corporations who are trying to figure out, how did Marks and Spencers get hit with ransomware? How did Land Rover Jaguar get hit with ransomware? How are these big companies that are investing a lot in tooling still getting caught? And look, I guess the answer is that, the bad guys have become very proficient at using ChatGPT to customize targeted outreach and figuring out ways to bypass the defenses. So I guess it's the AI paradox. Is it going to help us or kill us?
Or target their vendors, right? In the case of
Yeah,
Marks and Spencer.
exactly,
And
exactly, exactly. So look, guys, we're up over the 40 minutes. I really do appreciate your absolute expertise, two of the very, very best in the industry. Your insights were incredibly valuable, very insightful, and super clear guidance and advice on not just what to do from a practical hardening perspective, but also how you navigate your board and figure out how to get the money to do all of these nice projects.
thank you, Ronan. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Ronan. Thank you, Raluca. This was very fun. I was looking forward to it, and it didn't disappoint.
Thank you,
Thanks, Jeff.
guys.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.